Who are the Scotch-Irish? I've done about 10 to 12,000 hours of genealogy work. A significant portion of my personal genealogy, Kent Crutcher, is what the history books call the Scotch-Irish. Whom our ancestors married and where they came from is an important factor in our genetic equation. Often there seems to be some confusion on the term Scotch-Irish. It does not refer to people of mixed Scottish and Irish ancestry, as the name might seem to imply, but to the descendants of the Presbyterians from lowland Scotland who settled in Ulster, the northernmost province of Ireland, in the 1600s. They subsequently emigrated from there to America, starting in the early 1700s. Jamestown was 1607, Plymouth 1620. In all, some 300,000 Scots migrated to Northern Ireland, and at least 2 million of their descendants made a second move across the Atlantic from 1720 to 1800. Most Southern Americans can claim Scotch-Irish forebears. In Gaelic, the MC in front of a word means son of, but there are hundreds of Scottish family names without the Mac in front of a word. For example, McKinney means son of Kenny in Gaelic. In the Old Hebrew, Ben in front of a word means son of, also. For example, Ben-Hur means son of Hur. In my reading of language similarities, the Old Hebrew is most similar to Gaelic, spoken by the Scots. Modern Jews do not speak Old Hebrew, they speak Yiddish, a derivative of German. The word Scotch-Irish is definitely an Americanism and is hardly known in the British Isles. In Ireland, one's Protestant religion was, and is, usually enough to designate Scottish ancestry. Technically, Ulster Scot is more accurate. The Scotch-Irish term gradually came into use in the American colonies and was not always used in a complimentary sense. When the flood of Scotch-Irish immigrants began flowing into English-dominated America, there was much criticism against these aggressive and tough land grabbers. Life in Scotland had always been tough and rugged, whether in the highlands or lowlands. Hunger was a fact of life coupled with hard work, bitter weather much of the time, constant fighting among the clans, or against enemies from the north or the English to the south. This was how it was through the centuries. Then in 1603, England finally was successful in subjecting the Irish, and King James, of the King James Bible, seized the lands in Northern Ireland, sent the owners into exile, and opened the land to settlement from Scotland or England. Scotland was less than 20 miles away across the Channel, and times were hard there, so most of the settlers were Scottish. But they did not own the land. It had been given to favored persons, called undertakers, who were to bring in the settlers. Surrounded by a husty 1E people whom they despised, yet themselves regarded as inferior by the ruling English, the Ulster Scots became more assertive, more energetic, and less provincial than the indigenous lowland Scots. In time, their industry and enterprise transformed a backward province into the most prosperous part of Ireland. For the landowners who brought them in, it became a land of making money. The Scots kept sternly aloof from the native population of Ireland, Catholics, and clung to their Presbyterianism. There was little mingling between the Irish and Scots, and less intermarriage. One reference called the Irish more Catholic than the Pope, and indicated the Ulster Scots were more Protestant than John Knox and John Calvin put together. But things were not really great in Ireland for the Scots. They did not own the land they farmed. As Presbyterians, they were dissenters from the established church and were subject to certain restrictions. They were required to pay tithes to support the English church and were not allowed to hold office, among other things. Rents on the land were constantly raised. Tithes were increased proportionately. Dissatisfaction with conditions in Ulster was sharpened by awareness of opportunity in America. Those who had emigrated from Ulster to America earlier spread the word. These Ulster Scots received many letters from their friends who have already settled themselves in the American plantations, inviting them to transport themselves thither, and promising them liberty and ease as the reward of their honest industry, with a prospect of transmitting their acquisitions and privileges safely to their posterity, without the imposition of growing rents and other burdens. They could own the land they worked hard for. The thought of owning land and being their own bosses spurred the Ulster Scots to leave Ireland for a new life, in a new land, America. These Irish immigrants with their Scottish background were well suited to life on the America frontier. Upon arrival, they quickly passed through the land already settled, mainly in Pennsylvania, and situated themselves on the unoccupied lands of their choice, which usually belonged to the Indians in our southern states. But the Scotch-Irish were always ready to fight, thus causing the authorities to become more than a little unhappy with the turn of events. They would arrive on the frontier, symbolically telling the native Stone Age Indians, "This is not communal Indian land, communist land anymore. This is my land now, and we will fight for it." And they did, both sides. Usually the nearest neighbors to the Scotch-Irish were the Germans, and they loved having those good fighters between them and the Indians. This same pattern proved true as the land filled up to the mountains, forcing the immigrants to move southward into the Great Valley of Virginia, and on into the Carolinas and Kentucky, and then onward into Texas. The Scotch-Irish were proud of their Scottish heritage, but they did not think of themselves simply as Scots. Thus they generally showed little interest in St. Andrew's societies or Burns suppers. There can be little doubt that Ireland, rather than Scotland, was the old country to them. After all, several generations had passed since the first Scots had moved to Ireland. It was the mid-1800s before the Scotch-Irish themselves adopted the name. They began using it to disassociate themselves from the Irish Catholic immigrants who were swarming into the U.S. because of the Great Potato Famine in their native land. These new Irish, the Catholic Irish, the Potato Famine Irish, soon acquired a bad reputation in America. In the big cities of the Northeast, they swarmed. These Catholic Irish were considered a lower type, and they worked cheaper, thus taking jobs from others. Having no money, they became a burden to the cities where they arrived, and they became known as drinkers and brawlers. As long as the Scotch-Irish made up the great majority of immigrants from Ireland, they were content to be known simply as Irishmen, but as the numbers of Irish Catholics grew, with 4.5 million coming between 1860 and 1920, the old Scotch-Irish fears was rekindled in a new setting. They gave enthusiastic support to the various anti-Catholic societies that sprang up in the 1840s and 1850s. Following the Civil War, this prejudice peaked, but not before several anti-Catholic riots took lives and destroyed property in Philadelphia, New York City, Newark, New Jersey, and elsewhere. One author said, "Few Americans hated the Catholic Irish more than did the Protestant Irish." Now, 100 or so years later, that hatred has finally disappeared for the most part. Up until World War II began, Scotch-Irish organizations retained a measure of vitality, supporting Protestants in the ongoing conflicts in Ireland, and likewise Irish Americans, the Catholics, supported the Catholic cause over the sea. The war goes on in Ireland, as it has now for centuries. But since 1945, both U.S. groups have grown increasingly indifferent to the old country. The Scotch-Irish were the frontier men and women. The Scot-Irish settled almost exclusively in the southern states. The Catholic Irish mostly in the large cities of the Northeast, New York, Boston, New Jersey. On the frontier, weak died out early, the strong reproduced themselves. So if your heritage is from the South and you have been told you are Irish, what this means is that you are most likely Scotch-Irish, Ulster Scot, unless of course you are a Northeast city transplant, which is highly unlikely. Consider the size of Scotland. Let us mentally visualize the size of Scotland in square miles, which is about 30,000. This is about the same size as Indiana, South Carolina, or Maine. It is 12% the size of Texas. These people made a significant impact to the development of the American character, primarily settling in states of the South. And Texas was settled mostly from people of the South. I am a seventh-generation Texan, and from reliable history books of that time, the average Texan man was 6 feet tall, blue or green eyes, slender, and almost all were farmers. I am not saying height is the measure of a man. It is not. What I am saying is, historically speaking, the average pioneer Texan was 6 feet from historical records not propagandized. That is what Scots of old looked like, on the average. You cannot be of more pioneer spirit than my father, and he was 5 foot 6 inches. He was about as Scotch-Irish as you can get, from a human nature point of view. And so are his sons. Short books that educate us about the history of the Scots, before they became Scots, where the Scots came from, before Christ. I would like to introduce you to a couple of books written by Ray Capt, a Bible archaeologist, about the Scottish people. These books can be acquired at Artesian Publisher, located in Muskogee, Oklahoma. Do an internet search. The first book is called The Scottish Declaration of Independence, written by or commissioned by the King of Scotland, Robert Bruce, 1320 AD. Most of the excellent movie Braveheart was the story of the Scottish people striving for independence from England, with the focus on William Wallace. Most of the movie was a personalized fictional account of William Wallace, but the general theme was essentially correct. The Scots wanted separation and freedom from England, and both William Wallace and Robert Bruce were important men in that struggle. The Scottish title to king was Robert Bruce. He is a grandfather of mine through the Campbell clan. The Campbell clan was a prominent family in the region of Scotland called Argyll, in South Scotland. Remember the tough old Daddy Campbell in the movie? Braveheart gets shot with an arrow, growls, and keeps on fighting. Then it came time to remove the arrow. The sons look at one another and say to one another in fear, "You do it. I am not going to do it." That is what I think of the average Scotch-Irish American pioneer was tough. They had to be. This document, the Scottish Declaration of Independence, April 6, 1320 AD, was much like our American Declaration of Independence of July 4, 1776, 450 years later, with patriots signing both documents. This booklet by Captain is only 32 pages, and I suggest you read it. In this document, the Scots claims kin to the Scythians of Middle Europe that ruled that region for about 1,500 years, starting about the time Moses left Egypt, 1446 BC, and supplemented by the conquering of Israel, 745 BC, 700 years after the Exodus. Some of the Exodus went to Greece and some to southern Europe, where the people became the Scythians. They did not call themselves Scythians. They referred to themselves as Sak-ah, spelled S-A-K-H. Not the similarity to the Hebrew patriarch Isaac, or pronounce hyphenated I-Sax and the Germanic Saxon. The Scythians also conquered the territory of India and ruled those Stone Age people for over 2,000 years, enacting the chaste system, which forbade interracial marriage with the native Indians by penalty of death. This edict, over time, was ignored. So many mixed children sprang from the Scythian ruling class and the Indian peasants. Over time, up until today, India became a mixed nation, a nation of dark-skinned, dark-eyes, dark-haired people. It was like America, where every state, up until the 1950s, used to have laws against interracial marriage with the former slave descendants, which over time, those laws have been ignored. Capt gives the opinion that this document, the Scottish Declaration of Independence, also declared that these Scythians claimed kin to the Israelites of the Bible, as I summarize above. I have placed in this video some pictures of what the Scythians looked like, from their own carvings from gold. They look like Scots. They look like me. They look like native white Americans, with a touch more of Viking. In 1960, America was 90% white, 9% descendants of former slaves, 1% other, the other being Mexican and Asian. The second book I would like for you to consider is called Jacob's Pillar, also by Captain. It is in booklet form and is 96 pages. If you are a Bible reader, you might remember what the world calls the Stone of Bethel. This is the rock that Jacob used for a pillow in the wilderness near Bethel, when he had contact from God Yahweh in Genesis 28, 10 through 22. Jacob's name was changed by God to Israel. This was about 1950 BC, 50 years after Abraham. It became a holy rock a holy stone that the Israelites carried around in all their journeys into Egypt, the Exodus, into Judea, and when the tribes of Israel split into two nations, 975 BC. This split existed until the northern tribes of Israel, 11 tribes, was conquered by Assyria in 745 BC, leaving the southern tribe of Judea until they were conquered by Babylon about 580 BC, then relocated to Babylon to the east of Old Judea. This rock has quite an interesting story that Christians need to know about and have never been told. In short, the Rock of Jacob, Israel, the Stone of Bethel, escaped the Babylonian captivity of 580 BC. The sons of the last king of Judea, Zedekiah, were killed, but his daughters, along with his father-in-law, Jeremiah, the prophet, escaped this captivity, escaped first to Egypt, then to Spain, then to Ireland, with the daughters of Zedekiah, one of which was named Scot-A, spelled S-C-O-T-A. Scota became the genealogy lineage of all the kings of Ireland, then the kings of Scotland, then some of the kings of England. This stone of Bethel became known, in this new world, as the Stone of Destiny. The kings of Ireland were crowned on it. Throughout the centuries, as were the Scottish kings, as all the English kings up to today, were crowned on it. This genealogy was commissioned by the Queen of England over 150 years ago. It is the genealogy English, Scottish, and Irish kings claim kin to, but they never talk about it. Difficult to understand why they would not talk about it openly. My wife and I had a baby born dead, April 24, 1996, and we named her Scot-A, spelled S-C-O-T-A. Additional thoughts on who the Scots are, who they were before they were Scots. From a historical perspective, the damage that modern preachers have done by calling modern Jews God's chosen people, the damage is beyond great. By the Jews' denial of Jesus Christ as the Son of God should be enough for any thinking person to deny the Jews that title as God's chosen, to Christians. In addition to this fact, several books have been written in the past 50 years that explain how Ashkenazi Jews, 90% of modern Jews, descend from an old nation called Khazaria, the Khazars, in South Europe. Their king converted his people, the Khazars, to Judaism about 700 AD. Jews do not descend from ancient Israel. They are Khazars. One such book is The 13th Tribe, by Arthur Koestler, a Jew. The book published in the 1970s. It made the New York Times bestseller list, and Mr. Koestler was murdered shortly after the release of this book. The nation of Israel was conquered 745 years before Christ by the nation of Assyria, another Adamic group of people. Assyria was located north of Old Israel. That group of people, Old Israel conquered, was about 15 million. They became known as the lost tribes of Israel by historians. They became lost as to their identity, Israel, but not lost in their DNA. This 15 million did not fall off the face of the map, fall off the face of the earth. They went somewhere. Most went north, west, and northwest. Some intermarried with other descendants of Adam, some did not. Some mixed with the other races and became lost, genetically. My opinion, of the highest percentage of those Israelites that did not marry outside of Old Israel, became the Scythians, a tribe of nomadic people, who, in part, became the Scots. Remember, the Scots claim kin to the Scythians before they became Scots. Here are some Bible verses that I think apply to the Scots, the Sac, the Scythians, many who ended up in the American southern states, and from there, many went to the early Texas frontier. Isaiah 9:6. For a child is born to us, a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God. Obviously, this is speaking of Jesus. Isaiah was speaking to dispersed Israel. This was written after the dispersion of 745 BC. If you research Christianity before 1900, it is evident that this nation, America, was formed upon Bible laws, and there was no other religion in America. Before the open border floodgates opened upon us, a product of our enemies. Ask yourself, who wants to destroy America? In essence, America was formed upon Christianity. In 1960, America was 90% white, 9% black, and 1% other, the other being Mexican and Asian. 0 Arabs. To my memory, I never saw a mixed marriage in 1960, and you never saw mixed dating then either. I did not see an Asian until I was about 20, except on TV show and movies. Isaiah 10:11. From the islands in the sea, this is Great Britain, part of which is Scotland. Isaiah 11:12. And he will assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of Judah, from the 4 corners of the earth. Note, when he gathered them, where did he place them? Isaiah 54:3. You will spread abroad to the right and the left, and your descendants will possess nations. Note, what group of people did this? Isaiah 56 describes the ability of other races to come to God Yahweh through his Son Jesus. It does not mean they become Israel. It means they have the option to join themselves to Jesus and God Yahweh. But their DNA will never be Israel. Isaiah 65:25. The wolf and the lamb shall graze together, and the lion shall eat straw. Note, the wolf and the lion is symbolic of government. The sheep are his people. This means government and Israel shall become one again, which America was for almost 300 years, until about 1900. Jeremiah 3:17. At that time they shall call Jerusalem Jerusalem. The throne of the Lord, and all the nations will be gathered to it, to Jerusalem. This was stated by Jeremiah 586 BC. Jeremiah 23:3. And I myself shall gather the remnant of my flock out of all the countries where I have driven them, and shall bring them back to their pasture, and they will be fruitful and multiply. Note, who did this happen to the past 2,700 years? Jeremiah 23:8. Lead the descendants of Israel from the northland and from all the countries where I have driven them. Then they will have their own soil. This has to be America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Jeremiah 33:10. Hear the word of the Lord, O nations, and declare in the coastlands afar off, and say, He who scattered Israel will gather him. Note, where are the coastlands far off? This has to be America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Jeremiah 32:22. To give them a land overflowing with milk and honey. This has to be America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Ezekiel 20:34. And I shall bring you out from the peoples and gather you from the lands where you are scattered. Note Ezekiel was written about 575 BC. This has to be America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Ezekiel 34:16. I will seek the lost, bring back the scattered. This has to be America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Ezekiel 36:24. I will take you from the nations, gather you from all the lands, and bring you into your own land. And verse 26. And I will give you a new heart. Note, read Hebrews 8:8-10, Ezekiel 37:22. I will make them one nation in the land. And verse 23. And they will be my people, and I will be their God. And 24. They will have one shepherd. Note the one shepherd is Jesus. Hosea 1:10. Written 726 BC, during the dispersion of Israel 745 BC. Yet the sons of Israel will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered. And it will come about that in the place where is said to them, You are not my people, it will be said, You are the sons of the living God. And the sons of Judah and the sons of Israel will be gathered together, and they will appoint themselves one leader. Note, this refers to Jesus as the leader, as us as the sons of God. Joel 2:20 refers to an eastern sea and a western sea, which old Israel had only a western sea. This has to be America, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Zechariah 520 BC, chapter 2, verse 4, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, will be inhabited without walls because of the multitude of men and cattle in it. Note, Old Jerusalem had walls in it, a fort, In the Old Goth language, Amir means heavenly and Rika means kingdom. This is the end of my thoughts on Scripture concerning Israel in Europe and America. The new covenant God makes with Israel. Mainstream preachers will tell you that Jesus is the new covenant, and that covenant is with the Gentiles. All races are the same. All individuals within the races are the same. But what does the Bible say the new covenant is with? Hebrews 8:8-10. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind, and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. In part, this applies to the Scottish people. Excepting the descendants of former slaves, up until about 1880, America was almost all Northern European. Who was Jesus' principal target, his primary reason for being brought on this earth? John 3:16 says the whole world. But who did Jesus say he came for? Matthew 15:24, I came only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He later called the Canaanite woman a dog, not a nice name, if he came for everyone. And Matthew 10:5-6, do not go the way of the Gentiles, but rather go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I think these Bible verses apply to Old Scotland and to their descendants today. His followers knew his meaning. Modern Christianity does not. The meaning is, Jesus came only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. The Desperian of 745 BC. They had lost their identity over 745 years, but not their DNA. I wish I knew when modern Christianity theology developed into Jesus came for everyone in this world. I do not. There were and are two groups of Gentiles, the Israel dispersion Gentiles, 745 years earlier, before Christ, and the Gentiles, other non-Israel people who were white, and the Gentiles of the other races. What did Adam and the Israelites look like from Bible passages? My response to you is, do not let the world tell you, by pointing to the Jews and saying the Jews are from ancient Israel. They are not. Do not let modern preachers tell you what they did and do look like. Let the Bible tell you. Adam, 4000 BC in Hebrew, means to blush red in the face. Sarah, 2000 BC, was exceedingly fair. Rebecca, 1950 BC, very fair. Moses, age 80 at 1446 BC, exceedingly fair. David, 1060 BC, was ruddy, red-faced, showed blood in the face. Solomon, 1010 BC, blue eyes. Nazarites, skin whiter than milk. Jesus had to be one, as was Samson. Description of Jesus from historic documents. There's a link. Click on my picture and listen to the video of this description from historical records of his time. He was tall, blonde hair, blue eyes, slender. Scripture stated that interracial marriage for Israel was not allowed, against the law. Thus Jesus had to be a pure blood, as was Abraham, Sarah, Rebecca, David, Solomon. See links to interracial marriage by clicking on my picture, my content. I have 3 audios on this subject. Solomon was a pure-blood Israelite, but he broke God's laws hundreds of times by marrying strange women. And when he died, the nation of Israel broke into 2 nations. 975 BC, his mixed children fought with each other. The nations were Judea to the south, containing Judah, Benjamin, and some of Levi. This nation conquered by Babylon, 580 BC. The nation to the north was called Israel, 11 tribes. Joseph got 2 shares. It was the nation conquered in 745 BC, and later became known as the Lost Tribes of Israel. Clearly the Scots, as well as all northern Europeans, are all Adamic people, descendants of Adam. And the Scots, in my opinion, are the most pure-blood Israelites in this world today, being descendants of the Scythians, the Sak-ah. Israel dispersed at the Exodus, and Israel dispersed at 745 BC. Also, it is my opinion that Southern women are the most beautiful in the world. In the face, beautiful to me, a descendant of the old Scotch-Irish folk that settled and became the bedrock genes of the South and of Texas formation. These women, before massive amounts of sugar and processed foods in their diet, are slender, good facial features and tend to have blue eyes, green eyes, and to a lesser extent, brown eyes. You see a lot of blondes, light brown, red hair, and occasionally black. A final thought for you folks. Having done 10 to 12,000 hours of genealogy work, reading hundreds of original documents, all those years, one develops a feel for the different people I have researched. When you mate an African with an European, it is a long time running to get rid of the darker skin, the African facial features. It is dominant, genetically speaking. And it keeps coming back, even when you think it is gone, via recessive genes. I think it is the same with the Scotch-Irish. They have something dominate in their genetics. Intelligence, aggressiveness, a love of liberty and freedom come to my mind. The Thomas Jefferson genes were Scotch-Irish. Once you have Scotch-Irish in your genes, it does not go away easy, as the dark skin and other genes of the African do not go away easily. I think they, the Scotch-Irish, have the highest dose of old Israel in them. And even though you mate them with the English or the German, the Swede, their DNA is dominate. They were and are a special genetic structure. God Yahweh made them different. And Hebrews 8:8-10 is always there. God's laws placed in their hearts and minds. You can pervert it for a time with TV, newspapers, movies, public education, peer pressure, but it is always there ready to be awakened. Blessing to all of you folks. Kent Crutcher,